Good afternoon. We are going to talk about test today. It's a Brown's text, and first of all, we have the concept that the test is not something is to the students think about. We usually, as students, think about the test as something hard or something that we are not comfortable, and it should be different. We have three basic interrelated concepts: the testing, assessment, and the teaching. So first of all, we are going to see what is a test. In simple terms, a test is a method of measuring a person's ability, knowledge, or performance in a given domain. It is an instrument, a set of techniques, procedures, or items that requires certain performance from the students or from the test takers, as the author says, test takers. And to qualify a test, we have a method and a structure to the test. The students must understand the structure of the test and how it's going to be measured, how you're going to give them a grade, a note for that text, and how it's going to work. A test must measure. Some tests measure a general ability, and others tests measure specific competences or objectives. In a language context, we have the specific tests that measure one of the four abilities, like speak, write, read, listen, or other ability of the language, like grammatic or vocabulary, things like that. And finally, we have a test that measures a given domain, in the case of the proficiency test. And the general test, as I said before, measures the skills, the integrated skills, like all the skills of the language, all the abilities of the language. And a well-constructed test is an instrument that provides an accurate measure of the test taker's ability within a particular domain. Now we are going to talk about assessment, test, and teaching. There's a difference between test and assessment. Assessment is an ongoing process, and whenever a student makes a mistake or asks something, or when we give some directions to the students to study or understand the subject, this is an assessment. We are judging the student in a formal or informal way during the class, during the teaching process. So it is an assessment. A test is a prepared administrative procedures that occur at identifiable times. The students know when a test is going to happen. The students understand that they are being evaluated. A test is a kind of assessment, but as a formal kind of assessment. So we have to understand that we have teaching, right below we have teaching. In the teaching process we have assessment, and in the assessment process we have tests. Okay. The students have to understand that they are free to experiment or try out their own hypotheses about the language. about how to speak and understand how to use this language. So they must feel comfortable to do that. And even though we are doing an assessment, we are understanding how they work or how they get the language. They don't have to know this because it's more like an informal assessment. Then we have the informal assessment and the formal assessment. The informal assessment is everything that the teachers do and judge the students, judge the competence of the students. And when we, sorry for the noise, when we are talking with the students and the student make a mistake, and when the students don't understand some concepts or everything during the classes, we know that it can be a hard concept or a easy concept for them. So we are doing this assessment process, and it's an informal assessment because the students are not going to be graded by this assessment. And it's like a formative assessment. Why? Because the formative assessment is a evaluating process that occurs during all the process of the teaching. So whenever we judge the students during the classes and it's not graded, it's not a graded activity, or even an activity that's not graded, it is a formative assessment and an informal assessment. A formative assessment is more something like we do during the teaching process, during the classes, with the goals of understand how the students are understanding the subject, how the students are getting the subject, the language, how they are growing. And it's better than, I think that it's better than an unique test in the final of the course, because we can adapt our teaching methods to the way that the students are responding of that. And we have a formal assessment like exercises and specifically designed to the test, and the test itself is a formal assessment when the student knows that he or she is being evaluated for this. It is a formal assessment. And a summative assessment is something that we should summarize all the knowledge that the student got during the classes, during the course. So a summative assessment is like a final exam or an exam that occurs in the final of the course or in the final of the process of teaching. And it's a formal, it's normally occurs in a formal way. It's very similar as a formal assessment. Now we have a brief history of testing of assessment, formal assessment. The formal assessment, the test, normally follows the methodology that is using in the time that the test is developed. In 1950s, we had the behaviorism, and we have special attention in contrastive analysis and specific language elements such as phonological, grammatical, lexical. In 1970s and 1980s, we have the communicative theories that brought a more integrative view of testing. like something with all the abilities of the language. But it must be, or it usually is, a sum of the linguistic elements that we did during the classes. We have now the types of testing. The first one is the discrete point test. What says that the language can be broken in parts and we can judge just a competence of the language, like the speaking, listening, the writing, reading, vocabulary, grammatical, separated of the other abilities of the language. The opposite is the integrative test. What says that we can judge the communicative competence of the students in a global way. It's a test that requires of the students integrative competence, integrative understanding of the competences of the language, of the abilities of the language. We have some examples of this, like a cloze test, what is made when we have a reading passage, perhaps 300 words, and some of these words are missing. They have been deleted. So the students have to write down the words that are missing. And the students must understand grammatic, reading competences, writing competences like spelling to do this. Other example is the dictation. When the teacher or the professor, someone else, says something, when the teacher says something to the students and the students have to write it down. The students must understand listening and writing, and grammatical competence, vocabulary to do this test. So it's a very difficult test and very integrative test. We have the Normy reference tests, when we have an average score of all the abilities that were judged during the test, and we give this score to the students. It's more used in the proficiency of the language tests. And we have criterion reference tests. It is something that it is when we have the grade of the students. We take the grade of the students from these two, but we gave feedbacks to the students, and we say to them what they did correct or wrong. And a criterion reference to test is more of reflexive kind of test. We have the communicative language testing. It's more when we have a group of students, or we can do this with just one student too, but it works better with a group. And when we gave them some subject and they have to communicate, they have to talk about it, and we make a test based on this communication, on this conversation. That's it. And we have a performance-based assessment. The performance-based assessment is something like when, instead of give the students paper and a pencil and say to them, oh, write something, answer correct these items in the text, we just ask to them to work on something, like write something, talk about something, understand what someone is saying, and we gave them the grade about their performance, what they did. Instead of we do the test, the student is going to be evaluated by what he or she does during the based on their performance, like when they produce something and we say if it is acceptable or not. And finally, we have issues about testing. We have a lot of issues about testing, but I'm going to talk about only two in this brown text because I think it's the more important. Okay. First one is new views of intelligence. We have the understanding that someone intelligent is someone that is good on mathematical problems and in language, something like that. But we have multiple intelligence. Science says this, that the people have multiple intelligence, like spatial intelligence, musician intelligence, musical intelligence, and body intelligence, language intelligence, mathematical intelligence. So it's not fair judge all the students for just one kind of intelligence when they must have another kind of intelligence. So when we have a lot of types of intelligence, we have to understand that the test is not fair to everyone, to all of them, all of the students. The second one is the difference between traditional and alternative assessment. We have the traditional assessment, like the test designers and how the test is doing until now, but we have alternative assessment. I'm going to talk about the difference between them. Like the traditional assessment is one shot, when you have just one chance to do the right thing. A standardized exam, timed, multiple choice format, decontextualized test items, scores suffice for feedback, non-referenced scores, focus on the right answer, is a summative kind of assessment, oriented to product. It's a non-interactive performance. It's a fosters strengthening motivations. So it is what we have in the traditional. It is how we are evaluating our students. And the alternative one, the alternative assessment, is a continuous long-term assessment, when it's hard to understand, to the students understand how to make the test in the right way if they didn't get a test, if they are not familiarized with the test, with the kind of test. It's untimed, free response format, contextualized communicative task, individualized feedback and washback, criterion referenced scores, open-ended, creative answers, formative, it occurs during all the teaching process, oriented to process, interactive performance, and fosters strengthening motivation. Which means we have the motivations inside us, what we want to do in the test. I think that we could rethink about what we are doing in our tests and our assessment, and as the task asks to us, I just caught the most important things in this test to me. And I think that's it. I hope you like it. Thank you for watching.